All right, welcome to the Midweek Howl. I am Shane Grove, and with me is the Howler, suffering from his, what'd you say, Hardees #1 medium funk. Is that
4 hours and 32 minutes ago. You'd think it'd subside by now, wouldn't you?
Well, Hardees might just stick with you for a little bit longer than that. You know, maybe that's their new slogan. Hardees will stick with you a little bit longer. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, isn't that say something when a fast food meal makes you feel that bad for almost 5 hours?
Every day. I didn't say I felt bad. I just said felt tired.
Felt tired. Okay. But that's some powerful stuff. Makes you feel tired, affects you for almost 5 hours. And you only got a medium size.
I took it as I'm going to tiptoe around this, as a message from the Lord to slow down. Because had he not wanted me to eat it, he would have put people in front of me in the drive-thru. I told you before you hit record, I pulled into Love's truck stop to buy some gas this morning. I seen Taco Bell on the sign as I'm taking, you're going down the interstate and they have to tell you what's available at that exit. Mm-hmm. And I had seen double Taco Bell. It was like a Taco Bell billboard. And then as I'm taking the ramp, there's a Taco Bell sign. So it made me hungry, but as I get up there, the Taco Bell is on the opposite side truck stop, and I try to go Love's first if I can. So I pulled in there as I'm pumping fuel. Somebody tells me what a beautiful truck I have. The guy in front of me has got this jacked up Toyota something or another, and here I am. I've done made my people, the Christians, mad with the Lord, and now I'm going to make the short people mad. There's this little bitty guy about my age pumping gas with this giant four-wheel drive truck. So it was full of stickers, and it took me a second to realize, okay, it's a Toyota. Okay. But it was black with murdered out windows. That's the street name for tinted. Murdered out windows, had giant black wheels on it. And if this dude was 5'6", he had platforms on. And he had one of those Punisher type, a T-shirt with that Punisher logo, you know what I'm talking about? It's like a skull that turns into the flag. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yeah. Like the last guy that should be wearing a Punisher T-shirt. Not a sleeveless
Punisher shirt. Hey, sleeveless Punisher shirt, blue jeans, and not quite. You remember those? I was going to call them those Timberland hiking boots, but what were those Doc Martens? You know those?
Oh yeah,
kind of tan. Yeah. Boot, you know what I mean? You remember I'm talking about those tan hiking boots? Remember?
Yeah.
He's got those tan hiking boots on. He's got a gray goatee, and as I'm pulling up, he didn't quite pull far enough forward. He's kind of hogging my pump. Does that make sense? To the back. And he's got one of those giant, like $600 adjustable, because his truck is so tall, he's got to put all this hitch stuff on it. You know what I mean? To get it down to where you can hook a trailer to it or whatever.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
You know what I mean? It's chrome. And I pulled up and I'm seeing sizing up my little F-150 that I bought for my wife to drive. I mean, it's a chick truck, right? And as I get out, he says, I'm pumping my gas, and I don't remember exactly what, he had a one-liner to throw out there, and I turned, and he goes, man, that's a good-looking truck.
Was he being a smart aleck, or did he want to compliment
I think what he was trying
to
do is get me to tell him how good his truck looked.
Yeah, okay.
Just, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Is he like being a smart aleck?
So I
got a little truck.
I said, thanks, I've just about got it wore out. He goes, it looks pretty new to me, and I had my window down. I said, it's got 240,635 miles on it. And he said, no way. And I said, way, believe it. I drive it around, and
it ain't just for show like the Toyota.
Yeah, you know what I mean? It's like the real deal, right? It's like the real deal. And he goes, well, I just bought mine last year. And usually when people tell me they bought their truck last year, they're about to complain how much they spent. So his next line was, and I paid a third of what I paid for my house.
What?
So I don't even know this dude, right? I'm like at $3 worth of gas, and I'm getting all this info, right?
You still got $67 more to go. Who
Yes,
knows what
and
you're gonna get
I
out of
said,
it.
yeah, but you know what they say? You can live in your truck, but you can't drive your house.
That's.
And
So what's he say? So is he saying the truck is expensive?
I
and
don't
his
know.
house
So
is
he
and his
says
house
the
is
part of his
cheap,
house, and I
or-
said, yeah, don't get me on that. I said, this price of damn trucks and real estate. I said, the first real house I looked at was a house on 40 acres, and it was $40,000.
Oh my gosh.
I had a friend, and I said it was in Cole County. It's about 16 miles from state capital, as the crow flies. And I had a friend of mine's grandpa and dad were in real estate, and the grandpa was a friend of my dad. This friend of the family. So I said his grandpa was a friend of my grandpa. So he went with me to make sure to check it out. And I never forget, he looked at this place and turned up his nose and said, well, 40,000? Shoot, you can do better than this. And I said, that thing could bring between $8,000 and $10,000 an acre now with the crappy house on it.
And the crappy house wouldn't be so crap. I mean, no matter how crappy it was, it'd be worth three.
It didn't matter. People would, knock it down and build. You know what I mean?
Oh,
Don't
yeah.
care. So he says, yeah, I got 14 acres over here at Marshfield, and I paid $135,000 for it. And I said, yeah, that's a heck of a deal. And we kind of broke, but I didn't know. I don't want to say I'm standoffish, but I'm leery people. Every time I see the news, some crazy people are getting carjacked, skyjacked, robbed. You know what I mean? You don't know what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, we were in the mall yesterday in Columbus, and Christy peeled off. She's like, she went over to look at some shoes, and then she was going to the bathroom in the mall in a I think it was was a Marshall, really nice store in the mall, and anyway, this kid kind of walks up beside her. He's got his hood pulled up on his sweatshirt, and she's like, it just didn't make any sense that he was walking beside her where she was headed. He shouldn't even have been in that section. And so she's all, leery. And so she doesn't even end up going to the bathroom, just because
she's worried this dude's going to follow her in there or something.
Yeah. And she's like, I didn't know whether I should call you. And so I'm like, oh my gosh. And it's it's to the point, is that what we're worried about? Somebody walking beside.
We are.
I'm still not,
because we have not. I'm going to tiptoe here because I know you're on the cusp of greatness. Okay.
Okay.
But we have not punished. We have had a second generation or third generation of people who are not scared of the punishment.
True.
You know what I'm saying? That you would even think about approaching John Q. Stranger's companion, whether it be male or female, with the intent of ill will, right?
In a mall.
Because 30 or 40 years ago, in a mall, anywhere, in a mall or anywhere else, because 30 or 40 years ago, I'm not going to say you would be physically assaulted, but you would certainly be persuaded not to do that. But now when I see these videos,
it'd be a little encouragement to behave. That's what you're saying.
Yes, or reap the whirlwind. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like when I was a kid, even as an adult, like this dude at the gas pump, right? I'm leery to interact or do much with him because he could be Jean-Claude Van Damme. I mean, the little guy Chuck Norris. He could be something like that. Chuck Norris.
We're on Chuck Norris again. By the way, I had a sandwich yesterday in Columbus called the Cluck Norris.
Is it a chicken sandwich?
Chicken sandwich.
Kick to it or something or what?
Yeah, a little bit of kick to it.
But my point is, you don't know what that dude's going through, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And I don't want to be victim number one, so I just soon be left alone and I'll leave you alone kind of deal.
It's funny you said, and I don't want to rag on it. I mean, okay, so we're bigger than average guys, me and you, bigger than average guys, okay? And I don't I don't want to rag on the perception of
That's
somebody
right.
not
Keep talking. I got to get my water here. Hold on. Keep talking.
yeah,
I can hear you.
Suppose somebody not being as tall as us, as not being a sufficient enough male. Okay, but because I mean that just doesn't get, that's neither here nor there. But the tendency for littler guys to overcompensate because they feel like, I don't know why they feel like I got to get this big truck, and I got to chrome it out. So I feel like because if they knew how insecure you and I were being 7-8 inches taller than them, then they wouldn't have anything to worry about. They just get a regular truck,
Is that what it is? I don't know, because I got to watch, because I got so many. The word is out locally. I'm getting so many local followers that somebody might take offense to this. You know what I'm saying? But there's some. I call them baseball dads because I see them at practice because my kid plays baseball with their kids. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I've got some baseball dads that got trucks like, you know what I mean? I don't even know, but big, and don't get me wrong, when I was a kid, when I was in high school, I had a big truck, right?
But you were a kid in high school.
When I was in high school, I had a big Chevy, a 38-inch groundhogs on it. I had 2 different Suburbans with 35-inch BFG mud terrains on. I had some jacked up back in the late 70s or late 80s, early 90s. I had some, we called them goat ropers. Because you couldn't haul cattle or anything with it because you couldn't hook up a trailer. So the real cow people called us goat ropers, right? So I had some goat roping rigs. But as a late 40s, early 50-year-old man, first of all, some of these brand new trucks are $50,000, $60,000, and then they put another $2,500, I don't even know what these wheels cost. I can't even fathom what all this stuff costs. And I tell my boys, just buy land and
instead of trucks
and guns, and when you get 50, you can buy whatever truck you want. But
I couldn't even get up in some of those trucks. Like I dislocate my shoulder.
Too. I've got I got 2 trucks. I got an F-150 that my old lady drives. I kind of took it back from her because anyway, all that to say is that I got a big 3/4 ton Chevy 2500 HD gas truck that I call my farm truck. So like I hauled my brush hog over to my land yesterday or this weekend or whatever. And you're right, climbing in and out of that thing and jacking with it, and it drinks so much gas. I don't want to sound like, my parents, but actually I jumped a generation. I sound like my grandparents. But it drives hard. My son is like, oh, this is so cool. He wants to get a square body truck, from the 70s or 80s. And I'm like, dude. How they drive rough, they ride rough, they just those days are gone.
Let him learn. Let him learn the hard way. Now I don't know how we got off on a 15-minute tangent about jacked up trucks, but because I wanted to tell you the story that I got told by my stepdad on Friday because it was just he made me laugh. So I said, I called my stepdad trying to find out who owned a meat packing plant out in the country. I figured he would know.
Right.
And you know how it goes. You go off on a tangent, just like we just did. And he goes, it's funny. It's funny you ask about that place. I was just thinking about the guy who lived beside that place. And he said the guy's name. I'm not going to say it.
The guy with a bad leg or no leg or
the guy. Yeah, he goes, because the guy lived there. He goes, I played softball with him. He had 2 wooden legs. I'm like, well, what do you mean 2 wooden legs? So my stepdad was a really good athlete back in high school. He went to college to play basketball. But he was a really, really good fast pitch softball player. Like around here, I don't know what it was like there. Around there, like in the 70s, men's fast pitch softball was a big deal.
Fast pitch. Oh yeah. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Big deal. And he was a pitcher. He could really throw. He's a good pitcher. And it took us down a tangent that all the factories and stuff had really good softball teams, and then they had really good basketball teams too. And you could get a job in a factory doing nothing if you're really good at either one of those sports.
Totally, I could totally see that.
And not do anything for that job
but just play for the factory team or whatever.
Yeah. So anyway, so he goes, this guy.
The good old days.
Yeah, the good old days. So this guy who lived beside the meatpacking plant, he said, managed their softball team. And he goes, he had 2 wooden legs from the knees down. Because as a kid, he tried to hop on a train and didn't quite make it.
Yeah, I know a kid that did the same thing.
Oh, so anyways, he said they were playing this team, and this guy goes, hey, they were blowing him out or whatever. And this guy goes, hey, I want to bat. Can I bat? And they're like, yeah, go ahead.
The guy with wooden legs wanted to bat.
Guy with wooden legs.
Did he bat with a leg or did he bat with a bat?
Goes up and gets a hit. Okay, so he makes it down to first base. Now he's on the bases, and nobody knows he's got wooden legs except for the guys playing with him. So the other team has no. You
telling me he could walk that good with them?
He apparently could walk that good, jog, whatever. But my stepdad said they hit him all the way around to third base. Like they must have hit it to the fence to give him, and he had time to get all the way around to third base. So he's on third base, and now they're egging him on. Like, you're gonna score a run. Come on, you can do it. Come on. And the next guy up hits one to the fence, and he goes to, the catcher gets up and he's all ready to, catch the ball. And the guy goes to take off from third base. His one leg falls right off. And he falls.
So did he hop? Oh,
yeah, he fell right over. And the catcher, they said, about died right there on home plate because he thought he was watching the guy's leg snap off at the knee and just fall off. And I said, "Are you like?" I couldn't even imagine. I'm just like trying to imagine.
Right? Yeah, totally.
Face. And I said, "Oh my gosh!" I said, "Well, what happened?" He goes, "Oh, nothing. They just got him off." But he goes, "There was another time."
They got him out, or they got him.
They got him out.
They went in and threw him out. They didn't let him score. I mean, my God.
I don't think he crawled. I don't think he crawled home. But I think it was just done. That's what I really think. But they said, he said this guy was a big, big drinker.
Well, wouldn't you be if you?
Nah, I guess. Yeah, I can see. And he said they were camping at this small town outside of Van Loo, Ohio. I actually coached football there for a little bit. Van Loo, Ohio. It's this little, barely a dot on the map, but it's got a really nice campground. But he said they all took tents because they were playing softball there in the morning, and he said this guy just started drinking around the campfire. And he said so he took both his legs off and started walking around the campground on his stumps and thought it was funny. He was going up to cars and trucks and like peeing on their tires like he was a dog because he was at that level. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, what is wrong? What is wrong?
I have lost all ability to retort to that.
I mean, can you imagine like staggering out of your tent in the middle of the night and seeing this like, I don't know, 3 or 4 foot tall thing?
Well, they would think he was one of them little people. I was going to say midgets, but my kids say you can't use it anymore.
I don't know what you can. Little people, right? Yeah. Okay.
Little people. That's what they call them, right?
That's I guess. So, I had to tell you this stories because the visual in my head of this guy's leg falling off, number one, is great, and then him hobbling around on his stumps. Can I even say stumps? Yeah, I say stumps, peeing on people's tires.
I guess. Yeah, I don't know.
Like he was a dog. Oh my gosh. So, I mean, look, I know better. You got to have at least one wooden leg story, don't you?
I don't know which one I want to tell.
Well, you might as well tell. We got plenty of time. You might as well tell both.
I don't want to. I'm going to tell a short story. I knew a gal one time that was courting me, and she says, "Well, I'd like you to meet my grandpa." And I said, why is that? She said, "Oh, you'd get along so well with him. He's just the funniest, smartest." Now, not meet my dad. It was meet my grandpa.
Okay.
And I said, I don't remember. And she said, well, he's got one leg. And I said, oh, he must be a character. I think maybe that's how it went. I said, which grandpa? She said, on my dad's side, my dad, big Catholic girl. And she said, well, my dad's got 7 or 8 brothers and sisters, right?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And then she gets to the grandpa with one leg. And I said, boy, you must be a hell of a man, or something to that effect. And she goes, why would you say that? And I said, dude, one-legged man nowadays couldn't get a date, but to get a date and have 7, 8 kids, I mean, come on, he's got to be a character, and he lost it in the war somehow. So that's the short story.
Not having.
And that's not a real good one, but I'm saving the best for last. You know, I'm gearing up here. When you talked about the train, it reminded me of this boy I went to church with. It was about 5 or 6 years older than me in high school. He was one of 4 boys. And I was raised in a Baptist church. And on Sunday afternoons, my mom and his mom were good friends. So me and my brother spent a lot of time. My mom had 4 boys. His mom had 4 boys. They were just hers started a little older, right? So her second was as old as my big brother. Her third boy was my age. And then she had this younger one. And the oldest boy, I'm going to use the term rebelled against everything, right? Everything that you think a boy raised in the church should be, he wasn't. So when I was 7th, 8th, 9th grade, when I was 6th, 7th grade, he was already a senior, right, in high school. And he was growing his hair out. He played a Gibson Flying V like Randy Rhoads, and he aspired just to smoke weed and be a rock star, which was frowned on in the early 80s. I'm just telling you right now. Now, some kids, younger people will hear this and think that's no big deal. Well, I'm telling you, 40 years ago, it was a hell of a deal.
True,
right?
True statement.
Yeah.
I mean, even smoking cigarettes was
yes. So every single thing, I'm going to tell you another, where I segue this in, back in them days, new cars, you could see them. They were not covered up on train cars. So you'd see a train car full of 100 Buicks, right? 100 train cars full of Buicks or Cadillacs or whatever. And I watched these boys toil with a 5-gallon metal can full of railroad spikes. Railroad spikes come in a 5-gallon can that's steel. And they lived along the Missouri River bluff right outside of Jeff City, Missouri. And I watched these older boys climb down this because I was a fat kid, so there's no way I could get down that bluff with them. I watched them climb down that bluff and get a 5-gallon can of railroad spikes and drag it and work forever. Now, this is right after church. This is between church Sunday morning, and we'd go to church Sunday morning, Sunday evening, and my mom would drive us to town, and we would stay in town. And I'm only talking 11, 12-mile drive here. So, but back in them days, you're in town. So we would go to spend an afternoon over at these people's house, and the kids were supposed to just be out and playing or whatever. And of course, I grew up out in the farm. They grew up in town, so it was bicycles, and they would walk over the hill to the river down by the railroad tracks, put pennies on the track and stuff like that. But anyway, this oldest boy, I watched him and another kid toil with a 5-gallon can of railroad spike because they were little skinny rats. You know how some of those long-haired kids turn out to be, just little. And you know what they did when they got them spikes at the top? They waited till a train load of cars came and they started throwing those spikes off brand new cars down there.
Oh my God. Are you serious?
Yes. So of course I ran home and they never played with me again. The old boys didn't. And fast forward about 8, 9 years, when the youngest one, I was about 20, I think I was a cop by that time. So I was 21 or 22. And so this dude was like 28 and he's still living the life, right?
Throwing spikes at new cars.
But I don't know what he was doing on the tracks, but they were going underneath the train and it moved and it cut his legs off right there at the femurs, squished them.
Oh, God.
And apparently the compression cuts like that, they squeeze them. The weight of the car will squeeze them closed and like friction close them where they won't bleed to death. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
And he went from looking like Randy Rhoads to getting his legs chopped off, and from a wheelchair, he found the Lord and turned into a minister.
Really?
So I don't know what you can put together with that.
I don't know, but
brothers
but
passed
God,
away. I think
God,
3 of the
God sent you to Hardees and to learn the hard way, and look at it, and it sent him to the railroad tracks.
That's right.
The hard way, the even harder way.
But the stories I really tell about wooden legs is my grandpa had an uncle who was about 8 years older than him. There was a World War II guy that was the same age as his big brother. So back in the old days, when you'd have 10 or 11 kids, sometimes the oldest kid is having kids by the time the youngest kid, like my.
Oh yeah, like my mom. My mom.
Yes, my mom likes to tell the story that she was pregnant with my big brother at the same time my grandma, her mother-in-law, was pregnant with her second to last daughter. So you're pregnant with your mother-in-law, which is just. Yeah, I mean, nowadays it's got like a white trash connotation to it, but back in them days, that was just the way it happened. So when I say my dad's uncle, it was really his great uncle, but they were all kind of raised the same. So these guys went off in World War II, and in the Pacific campaign, he lost his leg in Guadalcanal and came back, and there was a whole load of Marines from Missouri. They got a Marine Corps League here in Jeff City, and the community is very supportive, and he was highly decorated, and the Buick dealership had bought him a car with hand controls, and they got donations and got him like a 48 or 49 Buick. And I think there was the kick to that was they were advertising these hand control cars for all these veterans that came back. So they gave him one to drive around, and then everybody would see it, and then they would want one. Right? Well, he was an alcoholic and crashed it promptly and pissed everything away. They used to say you could tell by what day of the month it was by whether he had his leg on or not, because at the beginning of the month when he got his check at the first of the month, he'd put his leg on, and when he run out of money, he'd take his leg off and carry a sign that said, "Disabled veteran, give me $1 or whatever."
Oh, God.
But they said he was,
Oh, God. That's okay.
But they said he was borderline, as now we know PTSD and all this crazy stuff, but I guess back in the 50s and 60s, they just didn't understand this stuff.
Yeah, he was shell shocked or something. Was what they
still know. Yeah. So, and they said he would fight at the drop of a hat. Highway 94, where I live, it parallels the Missouri River. And in the spring, when the water gets up, it crosses that highway. And the locals, a lot of times it never gets more than 3 feet deep, because the highway's way along the bluff. So, the field, the water across the field, it'll look like 1,000 acres underwater, but it'll only be a foot or two. You know what I mean? It's not very deep. So, and the locals, a lot of times will try to drive through it. Nowadays they still do, but back in at the old days, I'm sure they really drove in it. So, one of my favorite stories that my dad and his brothers tell of him was he had some kind of old car, and he was trying to drive into water, and it died. And I never could figure out if the water got that deep, or with one leg, did he slip the clutch and kill it? A lot of times, as long as you keep your power up and your exhaust going, it'll run. But as soon as your engine dies, the water will come in your tailpipe, and that back pressure will keep it from starting again. Right? So he ended up stalled out in a couple of feet of water, bumper height, is the way my uncle Billy Joe says. And some guys in front of him, behind him, in his space, started laughing at him. So, and he was an older guy at this time. They said, he was late 40s, early 50s. So it'd be like some young punk mouthing me and you, right?
Yeah, there you go.
So he's going to get out and bring him back to 1948 quick. You know what I mean? And he tells them, and they get out, and then when he goes to get out, I guess them old original wooden legs were balsa or something. His leg keeps floating up, so he's got to fall back on the car and keep one hand on the car, because every time he tries to take a step, his leg floats up, and he's got to fall back. You know what I mean? He can't keep it. He can't keep it down. So then they just stand there and ridicule him until they get tired and they drive away. What?
Oh my God.
So the other second story, and it sounds so much better from my uncle telling. My uncle Billy he said he was about 10 or 11 years old. And I think he was born in 53. So this would have been 1964. And they were at my great grandma's, his grandma's house on like a Saturday afternoon, about 1 o'clock. And he said back in them days, they'd all bring them kids to great grandma's on the farm and just let them kids run wild and, go to the bar or whatever. So, my grandpa and this would be two of his brothers. Well, one brother, and this was his uncle. So there's three old men getting in a car, and my Billy Joe wants to go, and my grandpa says, you can come. And he said, great grandma walked over to the window and said, whatever you do not drink with this boy in this car. And they said, oh, we ain't going to, as they're sitting there smoking cigarettes and everything else. We won't. Promise we won't. And they drove straight up the hill on 179 there outside North of Jeff City. And they went over to Browner's house, which is their brother-in-law, married to one of them guys' sister, and pulled in and got him. So he was four old men in this car. I say old men. Those guys were born in like 1917 to 1923. So in 63, they'd been, 40 years old?
Yeah, it wouldn't have 50 at the most.
Right to Jeff City, right up Boonville Road, so the local guys know what I'm talking about, and right to the Mill Bottom, which was that time, it's all tore down now, it's parking lots, but at that time it was bars along the river, just west of the Missouri State Capitol. So he said they drove straight they went from telling grandma we won't drink with this boy in the car, to driving, picking up their brother-in-law and driving straight to the bar. And he said they got in the bar and they're sitting around a round table 6 or 8 feet off the bar. And so it's my uncle sitting there with his dad, his uncle, actually two uncles and a great uncle. And that's great uncle Silas is one with one leg. And somebody at the bar was overhearing them cutting up or whatever and mouthed them. And one-legged Silas mouthed him back. And they got into a little mouthing operation, and Silas goes to push away from the table, and my grandpa said, do you need me to go over and take care of him? Now, my grandpa in 1950 was all-service boxing champion for the Army, so he had a reputation of being a badass. He's about 6'2", 225. And Silas says, no, I don't need that. So he had left his leg at home, and he had crutches.
So it was the end of the month. He was trying to get.
Yeah. So he, as he's approaching the guy keeps mouthing him like, "What's a one-legged old man gonna do?" or something to that effect. So Billy Joe says he got over there and hauled off and punched the guy like in the movies where he fell across another table, and then he grabbed him by the collar and pulled him up and held him against the bar. And was Billy's story, rabbit punching him, little short punches, because he had to hold on that crutch underneath the crook of his arm. You know what I mean? So he was holding a crutch, one-legged on a crutch, with his left hand in the guy's collar, giving him a bunch of rabbit punches. And so finally he hit the guy 8, 10, 12 times in the face and let him down. And the guy crawled out on his hands and knees out the door. And he said about the time he got out the door was when the first cop car pulled up. And they, oh shit, who's gonna, were we going to go out there and, go to jail? And I guess back in them days, if you got arrested for fighting, if you, it was like a $10 fine or something. It ain't like they do nowadays, tase you, shoot you, blackjack you, put your picture on paper. Back in them days, you just, they claim you could go to jail if you went on Friday night and you stayed till Monday. You got time served. It didn't have to pay a fine. But if you got arrested on Saturday night, Judge Riley on Monday morning make you pay a fine. You had to pay $10. And if you didn't have the $10 and you had a job, he would let you out like an ROR, but you had to promise to pay him, like you had to pay, like, you got to come back this Friday and pay $10, or if you can't swing that, you got to pay $5 to the clerk this Friday and $5 to the clerk next. I guess just laid back ways of running the court system back in the days, right? But he said they didn't have to go to court because by the time they all got it and finished the beers and got up the table, and the police officers are out there saying, well, who hit you? And he said, well, it's the guy in there with one leg. And he said the one old cop just couldn't get over the fact that you got your butt kicked by a one-legged man. So he said, sure enough, they walked out there, and there was Silas with one leg. And the cops just said, you guys go, you all leaving? And they said, yeah. And he said, okay, get out of here. They piled in this car and took off. No seat belts, no, just 11-year-old kid in the back seat. Go.
And that poor guy had the shame of getting beat up by a guy with one leg holding a crutch.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Well, we always say they make them tougher down by the river.
You know what? I guess, but it's got a sort of I don't know. I was going to say it's got a tragic ending down by the river, but I decided I'd not tell it. I'd save it for another time. But yeah, it's got a tragic ending. Mm-hmm.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of the From the Shadows podcast. Until next time, never shy away from the darkness or what may be lurking in the shadows. We are out.